Oh, and one final thing I want to discuss is the whole Ryuk contradiction. This is a major problem with the premise of the series. Like in episode 1, he says, I'll be the one writing your name in my notebook when it's either destroyed or when your time comes to die. But the problem with this is, Ryuk's not supposed to have 2 notebooks. So if that's a rule, that's part of the contract between a Shinigami who brings a notebook to the human world and the first human who picks it up, is that Ryuk is supposed to write Light's name and kill him. But Ryuk only has 2 notebooks because he tricked the Shinigami King, right? He took Sido's and said it was his. And so, how can it be an established rule or agreement that a Shinigami writes the human's name when the human themselves still has the notebook? Is he supposed to just snatch it back? That doesn't make any sense, right? So that's a very shockingly bold-faced contradiction in a series that is so logical and based on reason and all. It is kind of funny to think about. If Ryuk drops his notebook, Light takes it. Now Ryuk says to Light, it'll fall on me to write your name in my notebook. But the assumption is Light has Ryuk's notebook. Now in truth, Ryuk is clever enough, I guess, to have taken Sido's and dropped Sido's or whatever. I forget. He has a second notebook, right? Whichever is which. He has Sido's, he gives Light his own. He must have given Light his own, otherwise Light wouldn't be able to see him. So Ryuk must still have Sido's with him the whole time, and then eventually he takes it back. But whatever it is, it's a situation where he's not supposed to have 2. So how would they expect him to say, okay, Ryuk's gonna write your name? He said, when it's your time to die, it'll fall on me to write your name in my notebook. But again, given the circumstance of losing the notebook or dropping the notebook, supposedly by accident, although in his case it's not, you wouldn't be able to do that because you wouldn't have the notebook until they already died. Then you can take it back. And also, what if the notebook was destroyed? If it's destroyed, then let's say Light puts it in his drawer and his family comes to look in that drawer, or somebody sneaks in to his room. Remember early in the series? So then it would be destroyed and burned up in a fire. So Light would get off scot-free, but how would Ryuk then get it back or write anybody's name going forward? That would actually screw Ryuk over. Now you're not going to be able to kill people anymore and extend your lifespan. You're going to have to get another one, which the king's going to be pissed at you and all that. So if it wasn't for Ryuk having his second one in his back pocket, you would have lost not only the ability to kill that particular human with your notebook, you'd lose your notebook altogether. So, and then he says something odd in that final episode too. Who knows when you die? If they put you in prison, who knows when you die? Well, if there's one person who would know when you die, and he just saw him in the warehouse before with his Shinigami eyes, shouldn't that tell him his lifespan? So there's a bit of a confusion with the whole lifespan issue of, if you can see it with the Shinigami eyes, then you would know exactly when they're going to die. So let's observe Jealous, right? Jealous sees Misa about to die that day. So now you could say, oh, well, some guy walks up to Misa on the street, and that's why she's about to die. So at that point, her lifespan changes. But he knew ahead of time. So that means that whatever was going to happen that day, you get hit by a car, you jump off, you kill yourself, you get stabbed by a random guy, creepy guy on the street, like she was about to. He knew that was going to happen, and that's why he was watching. So it didn't change all of a sudden based on the actions of somebody else. So that's what I don't get about Ryuk or anybody else. You would already know, based on whatever was going to happen, when he was going to die. So Ryuk would have known all along that Light was going to die that day, or I guess he knew they were going to put him in prison, but why does he say, who knows when you die? Whatever the eventuality that happens is, Light wins, Light loses, Light goes to prison, Light doesn't die that particular day. He would know because he could see it with the Shinigami eyes. So I don't really get how he could, who knows when you die? If anybody would know, it would be you with the ability to see people's lifespans. And you might say, oh, those lifespans don't account for events that haven't occurred yet, but they would have to. Because again, Jealous didn't know how she was going to die, Misa, but he knew ahead of time, this is the day she dies, and it's some random guy on the street. So the same thing, Light's walking down the street, some random guy comes up with a knife, that would have already been predetermined, and Ryuk would have already known that. So it shouldn't be any surprise to Ryuk if Light was going to die that day, and he really played it close to the chest with Matsuda shooting Light like 4 times. What if one of those was a headshot, or if he kept going? He must have known that wasn't going to happen, but he allowed it to damn near happen. What if Matsuda does something unpredictable, changes his mind, and shoots him. Ryuk must have seen that you're not going to die there with his eyes, and so that's why he was confident not to write his name that early. But then he acts all confused, like, oh, I don't want to wait, so I'm going to kill you now. It's done for dramatic effect, but there's quite a few contradictions with this Ryuk and the Shinigami element. One of the weaker points of the writing, if you ask me, just, again, it's in the background to provide the premise and sort of the game theory elements, like the rules and this and that. But if you look at it on its face, it's a little bit arbitrary. So again, the jealous point is the best piece of evidence we have to say that he knew that Misa was going to die that day to some unforeseen event must be predicted by and included in the lifespan. So Ryuk should know from the beginning exactly when Light will die. I guess the only thing that would change that is the Shinigami Eye deal. If he did take the deal, it would cut it exactly in half and maybe somehow change the cause of it. I don't know how that works, but it must be predetermined. And they say that Shinigami have to follow like Light around or the person who owns the notebook around, but we see at numerous points Ryuk just kind of goes on his own or does his own thing. It kind of like when he's going with Sido and Sido's chasing him around and stuff like that. So I don't know to what extent they're supposed to, like, they're able to move freely. It seems like for the most part they're not able to, but sometimes they can. Or like when Rem kills Al and Watery, she's just kind of doing her own thing. It does end up getting her killed, but the point is, I don't know to what extent that's allowed to happen. Or you can just move freely, or you have to always be around the person who has the notebook. And one point people were talking about with sort of like the second episode, where like, oh, Light makes a big mistake and he kills Lindell Taylor. That is true, but on a strategic level, but he never simply wanted to get away. Like, he could just make everybody commit suicide, all the criminals, or he could make them kill each other. Like, right, you know, this person kills that person, and if you have both of their names, it'll happen. It's just, we rarely see that actually used in the series. In fact, I don't think we ever see that where he just makes one person kill another, but technically you can, especially criminals who might have that disposition, whereas ordinary people might not. But he never simply wanted to get away. He specifically wants to prove his superiority, for example, to L. So if Light proves himself superior to L, he therefore validates his sense of justice because he believes in that elitism, meritocracy, etc. Right? And if you're good enough to catch him, vice versa, he would accept the fact that, okay, maybe I am bad after all. So the way it ends also on that level is a little weird. He would be the first person to say, I got caught, I suck, he got me. Yeah, that's one of his catchphrases, he got me. He says that whenever L gets him, whenever Mello gets him at the beginning when he catches him off guard, it's like he gives credit and he acknowledges that somebody is capable or that they're doing something that is very impressive. You could say he's arrogant and full of himself, but it never gets in the way of his actual success. Arrogance is like, says, I'm Kira to Naomi, or I win to Nier. But in both cases, if he didn't win, he loses anyway, right? Naomi goes, he can't stop her. She's an FBI agent. She'll kick his ass if he tries to take her ID by force or whatever. So if that second ID was fake that she gave when she actually died, he was going to lose anyway. There's nothing he could do. So in that case, yeah, you're being a little bit arrogant sticking it to her, but it's not even overconfidence. It's more like desperation. If that doesn't work, it's over. Same thing with Nier. Nier already has the real notebook, so you've already lost. I guess it just proves your guilt more directly, but it's already too late. So either you win or you really do lose. And it's amazing that Light wouldn't have a backup plan there. That's what people don't like. It doesn't mean the backup plan has to work. It just means he should have one better than just using his watch. That's not really very good. And up to that point, they still didn't know the watch would work or like a scrap would work. So he could have done it a lot sneakier. Like how he writes Higuchi's name in front of the world's greatest detective right next to him. You're trying to tell me that he couldn't have done it behind his back as he's making his speech and his confession with all those crazy hand movements? Like, it had to be done. Only I could do it. So he doesn't simply want to get away. Wants to be known by the world and viewed as a god, or at least have a godlike sense of justice in the figure, right? The figure of Kira represents a certain form of justice, and if you don't follow that form, you'll die, so that's what criminals end up having to do.